I think it's time to stop blaming Christie sides because she's just completely out of her depth. She's not a very good coach. Her team have given up on her. And regardless of what you think about all the, whether the team like Caitlin Clark, whether they don't like Caitlin Clark, whether they like playing with her, whether they don't, whether they like the circus, it doesn't matter because they've very clearly given up on this coach, except for obviously, Christy Wallace, Erica Wheeler, and Julian Newman-Smith. So not Julian Newman-Smith, sorry. Apologies to Nalissa. Not Julian Newman-Smith, sorry. Julian Newman-Mitchell. So, Lynn Dunn, who is the GM, liked a tweet saying, and this is right after their game, retweeted, coaches grow into their jobs. I've seen it with Listham. They were all ripped early in their careers, just like Joe Lassie, and hard to explain to the average fan what the process looks like. First of all, Christie's side doesn't seem to know the first thing about. She doesn't have a single bit of creativity in the offense. Against the Mystics, they literally, and I'm not joking, they literally just had Caitlin Clark run around in circles. That is the most creative offense that she has had, is getting Caitlin Clark sprinting around in circles off 17 different ball screens. There is nothing. There is absolutely nothing. Even when things are seem to be working well with Aaliyah Boston when she comes yesterday against the third stringers. The ball was dumped into her and the rest of the players stood around, and it would take 3 or 4 seconds for someone to eventually cut. And when she started going at them and scoring, they would give her the ball and everyone would just stand there. Everyone literally would just stand there. They would never send a double down to Aaliyah Boston. It is what it is. There was no attempt made from Christie's side to help Caitlin Clark shake Dejanay Carrington, who's the best perimeter defender I've seen this year. There was no attempt to make. There was no attempt to get Clark to shake her. Because clearly in an isolation situation, Caitlin Clark can be decent, but not against Carrington. No attempt on that. And also, she's regularly throws her team under the bus. Her first press conference was announcing Caitlin Clark's weaknesses. At the end of the day, yeah, sure, Caitlin Clark does have weaknesses. She is far from a perfect basketball player. She is incredibly flawed as a player. What she does well, she is brilliant. What she does as far as shooting from 30 feet, no one not named Stephen Curry can do that. Can do what she does on the floor. Her vision is exceptional. Her ability to pass on the break is exceptional. She's very flawed in that, of course. And I've said it from the very start. Very, very flawed. But it's hard to succeed when you're not being put in a position to succeed. And that's literally a situation with Melissa Smith, with Aaliyah Boston, with Caitlin Clark. Even with the people on the bench, like Celeste Taylor not even playing, and she comes on and actually runs. She actually runs, which is a surprise. So, this is a team that is really just... They're really just not great. And the fact is that she's going to keep her job. She's going to keep her job. I'm pretty sure. I read somewhere she's on $500,000 a year. She is on more money. She is on more money than Caitlin Clark, Nalissa Smith, Aaliyah Boston, Tammy Fagbenle, and who else is decent on this team? Celeste Taylor and probably Lexi Hull combined. She's on more money than half the team combined. Obviously Caitlin Clark's getting $28 million from Nike over the course of a number of years. Caitlin Clark is probably in all her endorsements making $5 to $10 million a year. It is what it is. But at the same time, you're looking at it and you're like, if you have any basketball knowledge, you're just like, she needs to be fired. But the problem is that their owner literally, first of all, their GM is clueless. Absolutely clueless. I'm sorry, but again, to assemble this roster, to get rid of Vivians, who would suit playing with Caitlin Clark, and replace her with Katie Lou Samuelson. Look, I think Katie Lou's a decent player. But when your aggressive free agency signing is signing Katie Lou Samuelson to come off the bench for Christie freaking Wallace, who stinks. It doesn't make any sense. At least go a bit bigger. If you're going to put Mitchell on the floor, you don't need to play Christie Wallace the 3. Christie Wallace, 5'11", slow, doesn't play defense, sometimes can shoot relatively well. Putting her on 6'4" to want a bonner to start the game. Christie's size is incompetent. She's incompetent, but also she's been left in a bit of a bad situation. Lynn Dunn has put her in a horrible situation with this roster. I think even the best coach in the world would struggle with this roster, but it doesn't help that it's a horribly constructed roster with one of the worst coaches I've ever seen, and she's not gonna be fired. They're not gonna fire her. They're gonna stick with her. Free Caitlin Clark. I'm sorry, free Caitlin Clark. Free Caitlin Clark. For the greater good of basketball, Lynn Dunn. Free traitor. You see, the Las Vegas Aces. I think they might be a little bit antsy right now. They're 5-4. You've got Kay Martin there who can play with her. You've got AJ Wilson who's a leader. I'm thinking maybe, Jackie Young. Jackie Young for Caitlin Clark. And that's not a bad trade. And if the Aces don't want to do that, Jackie Young. Let's just say Jackie Young and... Heck, can you trade Tiffany Hayes? Can you trade Tiffany Hayes too? Jackie Young, Tiffany Hayes. I know probably couldn't be. She just came out of retirement. Trade the two of them for Caitlin Clark, and you're probably not getting Aaliyah Boston. Let's just say if they're convinced that they're going to win more games with those players, and they're first this year, if they think that pick's going to be like 3-4, and unless they get and they're page or bust, and they don't want to bring in guards, they don't want to bring in another guard necessarily, and they're happy with Melissa Smith and Aaliyah Boston. Caitlin Clark in a first, because I think Caitlin Clark's value as far as on the floor might be less than Jackie Young. Make that trade. Make that trade for the greater good of basketball. You put Caitlin Clark in Vegas with Kate Martin, with Aja Wilson, with Kelsey Plum, with Chelsea Gray, the point guard when she comes back, with just a squad with Megan Gustafson, the Iowa connections there. For the greater good of basketball, just do that. And now I know obviously maybe they don't do that trade, but that would be ideal, Lynn Dunn. If you are making the most incompetent roster possible, if your job is to if your job is to win games, you haven't done that. You haven't done that. You can't do that. A team who has not had a winning season. And the worst part is they haven't even had close to a winning season in 10 years. We called the Kings incompetent for years, but there were some years with Buggy they won 33 games. Let's not forget, they have succumbed relatively close to a winning season. That season last year where they went 13-27 and got the number 1 pick was their best season in a long, long time. They went 5-31 in Alyssa Smith's rookie year. 5-31. Please, Lynn Dunn, you're not gonna fire Christie Sides. Cool. You're not going to sign any good free agents. Cool. Go and do the only thing that will help the sport of basketball. Trade Caitlin Clark. Trade Caitlin Clark to literally anywhere. Literally anywhere you can trade her to. Your team's still going to suck. But I would say a trade that might work for both parties, make your team slightly more competent right now, but a trade that I think Vegas might make. Vegas might make. Maybe if you want to, because you might have to throw in something additional to Caitlin Clark for Jackie Young. You go and make that trade. You can still have your terrible team in Indiana, who nobody cares about, and fans, even before people cared about them last year, were still asking for Christie Sides out. You can have your terrible high school coach, whose team give up, and some terrible players, and be a terrible basketball team for as long as you want to be the GM. That's completely fine. That is completely fine. You can have your terrible basketball team. You can have a terrible team, use it as a tax write-off, because the Pacers owner, this is what it is. You can have that terrible team. They've been a terrible team for 10 more years, and you know what? They're going to continue to be a terrible team with or without Caitlin Clark. But at least for the good of basketball, give the one hope, trade the one hope for WNBA, because Caitlin Clark stinking it up helps nobody. It helps nobody. And unfortunately, whether you believe Caitlin Clark is good, whether you believe Caitlin Clark sucks, literally nobody can look good in this absolute dumpster fire of a franchise. You can't, I genuinely don't think you can actually make a legitimate argument that Caitlin Clark is a bad player, because I think you could put prime Diana Taurasi in this Fever team and she would still look like she was terrible.